I still remember the sting of their laughter when Mark pointed at the frayed cuff of my second-hand suit during the Westbrook client meeting. Is that held together with hope and dreams, Kevin? The entire room erupted, even Mr. Westbrook. That humiliation burned into my soul. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the look on their faces 3 years later when I walked into that same conference room and dropped my keys on the table. As your new landlord, gentlemen, we need to discuss some changes around here. Their smug smiles vanished instantly. Sometimes patience and persistence create the sweetest revenge. I grew up in the kind of neighborhood where dreams go to die. Our apartment building on the east side had more broken windows than working ones, and the sound of sirens was our nightly lullaby. Dad worked 2 jobs until his back gave out, and Mom cleaned houses for families who made more in a day than we saw in a month. When Dad's medical bills started piling up, I'd watch Mom silently cry at the kitchen table after she thought I was asleep. That's what poverty does. It doesn't just empty your wallet, it tries to empty your spirit. School became my refuge. While other kids in my neighborhood were getting swallowed by the streets, I buried myself in books. My high school guidance counselor laughed when I told her I wanted to work in finance. "People like you don't make it on Wall Street," she said. I didn't argue. I just worked harder. I took night classes at community college while working at a gas station during the day. My hands would smell like gasoline while I studied economic theory past midnight, my eyes burning from exhaustion. Every rejection letter felt like a punch to the gut. 47 applications, 47 rejections. But on the 48th try, Blackridge Financial gave me a shot. The lowest position possible, basically glorified coffee runs and filing, but it was a foot in the door. The day I got that call, I ran home 6 blocks in the pouring rain to tell my parents. Mom cried again, but different tears this time. Dad tried to hide his, pretending something was in his eye. That night, we splurged on takeout Chinese food, an extravagance we hadn't allowed ourselves in years. My first day at Blackridge felt like stepping onto another planet. The marble lobby gleamed so bright I could see my reflection in it. Everyone wore clothes that cost more than my entire wardrobe. I had exactly 2 dress shirts and 1 suit I'd found at a thrift store and tailored myself, watching YouTube tutorials to learn how. My colleagues drove Audis and BMWs. I took the subway and walked the last mile to save on bus fare. They discussed summer homes in the Hamptons, while I worried about making rent on my shoebox apartment with 3 roommates and a persistent mold problem. The stark divide became painfully clear at the first team happy hour. "Where did you summer growing up, Kevin?" asked Brent, swirling his 20-year scotch. When I answered honestly, "Summer wasn't a verb where I'm from," the awkward silence felt suffocating. They spoke of prep schools and legacy admissions to Ivy League universities, their paths paved by family connections and trust funds. Meanwhile, I had fought tooth and nail for my state university scholarship, working weekends and holidays to afford textbooks. Despite everything, I outworked them all. While they left at 5 p.m. sharp for squash games and cocktail parties, I stayed until midnight learning everything I could about the business. I took on the clients nobody wanted, turned around failing accounts, and slowly built a reputation for tenacity. What I lacked in pedigree, I made up for in hunger. My boss, Richard, seemed to notice, occasionally nodding with approval at my analysis reports. I dared to hope that maybe merit still mattered, that the dream I'd fought so hard for wasn't just a cruel illusion. I had no idea how brutally that hope would be tested, or how sweet vindication would eventually taste. 6 months of grueling work finally earned me a seat at the table for the Westbrook acquisition, a $50 million deal that could cement Blackridge's reputation in the market. I had spent 3 sleepless weeks preparing my analysis, discovering an overlooked tax advantage that could save Westbrook nearly $2 million annually. The night before the presentation, I rehearsed in front of my bathroom mirror until my roommates banged on the wall to shut up. The conference room buzzed with energy that morning. I sat nervously adjusting my tie, the same one I'd worn to every important meeting, when Richard nodded for me to begin. My hands trembled slightly as I distributed my reports, but my voice held steady as I walked through the numbers. Mr. Westbrook leaned forward, clearly impressed by the tax strategy. Then I saw it, the subtle glance between Richard and Brent. When we broke for coffee, Richard pulled me aside. Great work finding that angle, Kevin. Let Brent take it from here, though. He has more presence. Before I could protest, he squeezed my shoulder and walked away. I watched in stunned silence as Brent presented my findings after the break, never once acknowledging their source. When Mr. Westbrook praised the innovative approach, Brent smiled broadly, accepting congratulations from around the table. That's when Mark pointed at my frayed cuff and made his cutting remark. The laughter that followed burned through me like acid. The Westbrook deal closed successfully, with Brent receiving full credit and a substantial bonus. I swallowed my pride and continued pushing forward, hoping someone would eventually recognize my contributions. Instead, the exclusion became more deliberate. My desk was moved to the far corner. Meeting invitations mysteriously disappeared from my calendar. Lunch conversations would halt when I approached the table. The company holiday party became the breaking point. 5 whiskeys deep, Richard cornered me by the bar. You know your problem, Kevin? His breath reeked of alcohol. You don't belong here. We can smell it on you. That desperation. Like a stray dog begging at the table. When I turned to walk away, he grabbed my arm. I'm not finished, he slurred. Something snapped inside me. I yanked my arm free with such force that Richard stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses. The crash silenced the room. You think I don't see what you're doing? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You stole my work and gave it to Brent because his father plays golf with the board members. Richard's face darkened. That's enough. He straightened his jacket. Security will escort you out. Clear your desk tomorrow. The slap landed before I even realized I'd swung. The collective gasp in the room was followed by absolute silence. Richard touched his reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock. Security guards appeared on either side of me. As they dragged me toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of Brent's smug smile. The termination letter arrived the next day, citing unprofessional conduct and poor cultural fit. No severance, no references. My apartment followed soon after. Without income, I couldn't make rent. 3 weeks later, I was sleeping in my car, the tailored dreams of my future compressed into a single duffel bag in the back seat. On particularly cold nights, I would sit in 24-hour diners until they kicked me out, applying for jobs on public Wi-Fi that never called back. The finance world is small, and word spreads quickly about those who make scenes. I had been blacklisted. Rain pounded on the roof of my car one night as I stared at my phone. 1 bar of battery left, and a final rejection email glowing on the screen. I had hit rock bottom, but sometimes, when you've lost everything, you finally see what matters, and what you're capable of. The letter arrived at my sister's address, where I'd started receiving mail after losing my apartment. Through the rain-streaked windows of my car, I tore open the envelope with trembling hands. My grandfather, a quiet man who spent 50 years working the same factory job, had passed away. He'd left me $32,000, his entire life savings. I broke down sobbing in the driver's seat, not just from grief, but from the brutal irony. The amount that might have seemed pitiful to my former colleagues represented everything my grandfather had managed to accumulate in a lifetime of hard work. That night, parked outside a Walmart, I made a decision. I wouldn't waste this money trying to claw my way back into a system designed to reject people like me. Instead, I'd use it to bet on myself. The next morning, I checked into a modest motel, showered for the first time in days, and began researching. While at Blackridge, I'd noticed an emerging pattern in green energy storage startups that the major players were overlooking. 4 companies in particular showed promise, operating in a space I understood intimately from my analysis work. I divided my inheritance between these 4 ventures, keeping just enough to rent a tiny studio apartment and survive on ramen and coffee for 6 months. My sister thought I was crazy. "You're homeless, and you're gambling your only money on startups?" she yelled during one of our rare calls. Maybe I was crazy. Or maybe desperation had given me clarity my privileged colleagues could never understand. 3 months later, when 2 of my investments failed completely, that clarity wavered. I took a job stocking shelves overnight at a grocery store to stretch my remaining funds. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. One of my investments, Volt Storage Solutions, announced a breakthrough battery technology. By the end of the week, their stock had tripled. Within a month, my $8,000 investment was worth nearly $200,000. The 4th company followed suit 6 weeks later when they secured a major government contract. Suddenly, I had capital. I quit the grocery store job and rented a small office, establishing KDM Investments, named after my parents, Karen and David Miller. I leveraged my knowledge of markets and my outsider perspective to spot opportunities others missed. Each successful venture built my reputation and portfolio. The real turning point came 18 months after that humiliating holiday party. I was reading industry news when I saw that Blackridge Financial was struggling. A series of failed investments and the departure of key clients had left them vulnerable. The article mentioned they might have to downsize their office space in the prestigious Harmon Building downtown. I nearly spilled my coffee when I read that last detail. A quick search confirmed it. The Harmon Building was being sold by its aging owner, who was retiring to Florida. The asking price, $18 million. My portfolio had grown to just over $5 million. Nowhere near enough. But something primitive and powerful ignited inside me. This wasn't just an opportunity, it felt like destiny. I called Miranda Jiang, a venture capitalist who had profited handsomely from my recommendations. "I need to raise $15 million in 2 weeks, I told her without preamble. She laughed, then realized I was serious. For what? When I explained my plan to buy the building housing Blackridge Financial, she was silent for a long moment. "This is personal, isn't it?" she finally asked. "Completely," I admitted. "That's usually a terrible reason for an investment," she said, then sighed. "Send me the numbers tonight." What followed was the most intense 2 weeks of my life. I barely slept, preparing financial projections, meeting with potential investors, and navigating the complexities of commercial real estate. Miranda brought in 3 other investors. I leveraged everything I had built. The night before the deal closed, I stood on my small balcony looking at the city lights, barely believing what was about to happen. When I signed the final papers, the lawyer handed me a set of master keys. I held them in my palm, their weight somehow greater than their size would suggest. 3 years after sleeping in my car, I now owned the building where my dreams had been crushed. But owning the building wasn't enough. I needed them to know who owned it. I needed to look into Richard's eyes when he realized his fate rested in my hands. Some would call it petty. I called it justice. I had the building's ownership transferred to a shell company with an obscure name. Then I waited for the perfect moment to make my move. That moment came sooner than expected, when the building manager resigned unexpectedly. Now the stage was set for a confrontation 3 years in the making, and I intended to savor every second of it. I had my suit tailored by the same gentleman who dresses visiting dignitaries. A far cry from my thrift store days. Italian wool in deep charcoal with subtle crimson stitching at the cuffs, a personal touch to remember the mockery of my frayed sleeves. As I stepped into the Harmon Building's marble lobby, the security guard nodded respectfully. "Morning, Mr. Miller." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to my own personal reckoning. Blackridge's reception area hadn't changed, still all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate clients with its cold opulence. The receptionist looked up, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. "I'm here to see Richard Bennett," I said calmly. "Tell him the building's new owner would like a word." She fumbled with the intercom. Minutes later, Richard emerged from the hallway, his smile practiced, but his eyes wary. 3 years had aged him more than they should have. New lines around his mouth, gray peppered through his temples. "Mr. Miller, what a surprise," he said, extending his hand. I looked at it and let the moment stretch uncomfortably before finally accepting the handshake. "I thought we should discuss some changes to your lease agreement," I said. "Perhaps in the main conference room? I'd like the executive team present." The blood drained from his face, but professional composure quickly masked his shock. "Of course. We were just finishing our morning meeting." I followed him down the hallway, where framed magazine covers celebrated Blackridge's past glories. Through the glass walls, I could see them all. Brent, Mark, the entire team that had treated me like something stuck to their shoe. Richard opened the door, and all conversation ceased. "Gentlemen, you remember Kevin Miller," Richard said, his voice oddly strained. "He's apparently the new owner of the building." The silence was delicious. I savored it like fine wine as I strolled to the head of the table, Richard's usual seat, and placed my keys on the polished mahogany. The same table where they had laughed at my expense now felt like an altar for what was about to unfold. "Actually," I corrected, "I've owned the building for 3 weeks now. I just wanted to wait for the right moment for this conversation." I loosened my tie slightly. "You seem surprised. Did you think I disappeared after you blacklisted me from the industry?" Brent shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Kevin, business is business. Nothing personal." I slammed my fist on the table with such force that water glasses jumped. "Don't you dare say it wasn't personal!" The outburst shocked even me. I took a deep breath, regaining my composure. "You stole my work. You mocked my clothes. You made me sleep in my car. Each of you sitting here participated in destroying someone just trying to earn an honest living." Mark spoke up, his voice dripping with renewed condescension. "So what now? You evict us out of spite? How juvenile!" I laughed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "That would be too easy. No, I have something far more interesting planned." I withdrew a folder from my briefcase. "Your lease is up for renewal next month. Here are the new terms." Richard snatched the document, scanning it rapidly. His face contorted in confusion. "These rates are below market value." "Keep reading," I instructed. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. Profit-sharing requirements. Mandatory internship program for underprivileged students. Wage transparency clauses. "The building will remain profitable," I said, "but it will also become a place where merit matters more than connections." I stood and buttoned my jacket. "You have 48 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, yes, you'll need to find new offices, and I'll personally make sure every potential landlord in the financial district knows exactly who you are." Richard's face flushed with anger. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "You self-righteous little—" He lunged forward, swinging wildly. I sidestepped easily, his momentum carrying him into the wall. Security appeared at the door. My security now. "It's fine," I waved them off. "Mr. Bennett was just expressing his thoughts on the new lease agreement." Richard straightened, adjusting his tie with trembling hands, humiliation evident in every movement. exactly how I had felt that night. "One last thing," I said, moving toward the door. "The Westbrook tax strategy, my strategy, was flawed. I discovered the problem 6 months after you fired me. They'll be audited next quarter and face substantial penalties unless they restructure immediately." I smiled thinly. "Thought you should know." I left them in stunned silence, their world fundamentally altered in 15 minutes. The victory tasted sweeter than I'd imagined, but something unexpected accompanied it. Not happiness exactly, but a release. The weight of hatred I'd carried for 3 years lifted as I walked out of that conference room. Blackridge accepted my terms 2 days later. The internship program started the following semester, bringing brilliant kids from neighborhoods like mine into a world previously closed to them. I didn't evict my enemies. I forced them to become part of the solution. 6 months later, I passed Richard in the lobby. He nodded stiffly, acknowledging my presence in a way he never had when I worked for him. I nodded back, neither of us speaking. Some wounds never fully heal, but I'd discovered something more powerful than revenge: the ability to change a broken system from within. I still own the building. On difficult days, I visit the conference room after hours and sit at the head of that table, remembering how far I've come. Not because of connections or privilege, but because they underestimated the power of someone with nothing left to lose. They humiliated me for being poor. Then I bought the building. But the real victory wasn't in acquisition. It was in transformation, both of the building and of myself.